Bruins Beat is brought to you by the Game Time app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Scott McLaughlin. Scott, what is up?
Not much, Evan. How's your offseason going?
Oh, it's terrific. It's just great. A lot of NHL playoffs. A lot of it's funny. We have YouTube TV in the house. And I know YouTube TV gets a lot of flack. Every streaming platform gets a lot of flack, but I do a lot of the side-by-side NHL with like an NBA game, have like the Red Sox like on my laptop, and it's not awful. I mean, I'd rather be covering a Bruins playoff run. I'd rather be talking about a Bruins playoff run, but the side-by-side thing, I sound like I'm 100 years old. I kind of like it.
Yeah, I find myself like now, trying to play draft experts. So I'm like, how do I watch U18s? Like, let me get on the Sweden-Finland stream yesterday, and still finding ways to get the hockey fix for sure.
Oh yeah, and for me, like I focus all year mainly on players who were 18 and 17 and 16 and 15, and so it's like I'm just taking a little bit of a break from a lot of that stuff and reading a lot on it and watching it and kind of following along with it. But first, I haven't been in a rink in a couple weeks, like to watch games for work, which is crazy. But that's this time of year. Things start to ramp back up for me at the end of May, but it's a little bit of time off right now from that. But big stuff coming up for the Bruins. I can't believe I'm saying this, but NHL Draft Lottery on Monday night. When was the last time we cared about a draft lottery? I 2011? Maybe?
Like, probably. So that was, but even that, like, we knew their odds were really low because they ended up with the 9th pick in 2011, and I think they were right around
2010. 2010.
But yeah, 2010 is the last one we really cared this much about, because that, of course, was the Taylor or Tyler draft where they actually had a really good shot to get the number 1 pick. Of course, ended up number 2 instead. But yeah, it's been, outside of that, definitely been a long time, because 15 and 16, it's like, yeah, they were part of the lottery, but they were like the first team out of the playoffs, so you knew they weren't moving up. So but yeah, being 5th going in, it's like, hey, that's outside of those top 2 teams, like you have a decent shot there.
So I'll go through the percentages. To get the first pick, they have an 8.5% chance. To get the second pick, they have an 8.6% chance. Third is 0.3%. So I assume you're not going to be picking third. Fourth, 0. No chance at being the team that picks fourth. Fifth, 24.5%. Sixth is 44%. And seventh is 14.2%. They can't pick lower than 7th. So the good news is you're going to get a high-end player. You should, at least. The not so great news is chances are you're not picking in the top 4. 3 or 4 seem almost out of the question, or just completely out of the question. First and second are fun to debate, and I'm sure you and I will talk about it here. The likelihood is that you're picking somewhere from 5 to 7. And I think that's probably where it ends up. But there is part of me, Scott, that I look at the NHL playoffs and I look at the lower ratings and I go, maybe rig it for Boston for number 1. I don't know. I could get on board with that.
Of course. Like that's the, hey, look, there's been lotteries that have broken, let's say conveniently for the NHL in the past, whether it's Chicago getting Bedard or the Rangers getting the number 1 pick the year that it was Lafreniere. They moved up for that. And, obviously Lafreniere didn't turn out to be like a generational player, but he's a good player who helps. So, sometimes these things have a funny way of happening, But you also look at that, and then you're like, well, I'm sure Chicago clearly needs more help than just Bedard, so maybe they help them out again. Philly's a big market that's been down for a few years. Like, they're sitting there. So even in this conspiracy land, like, you're kind of like one of 3 of the big markets there.
Yeah, you still have to compete with those guys. And there isn't like a generational player at the top where like it's like, all right, like Macklin Celebrini, you're a Boston Bruin, or Connor Bedard, you're a Chicago Blackhawk. There isn't any of that really with this draft, but as much as this draft isn't high end, you don't have like that guy at the top who's like a projected generational player. There are a lot of guys, at least to me in this top 10, who seem to be players who should be impact at the NHL level. Maybe not necessarily 100-point guys, but there are, and this is the good news for the Bruins, there are a number of centers here that they will likely get at least, they will get one of them, whether it's early in the draft and they get to pick, or they're picking 5th, 6th, or 7th, and they're sort of taking from who's still available. But a lot of centers who should project to be like 60-plus point guys in the NHL someday, and I don't think that's a horrible thing.
Yeah, that there's 5, maybe 6 centers who I would say at least have a chance of being a legit number 1 center. Michael Misa is the closest to a sure thing, which is why he's going to go in the top 2. But, that whole next group of James Haggs, Anton Frundell, Caleb Denoyer, Jake O'Brien, and Roger McQueen I'm a little down on, but like you'll see people have him ranked as high as the top 5 as well. I mean, those guys all have a chance. And like if you're the Bruins, it's like, yeah, okay, you love a sure bet, obviously, but you'll gladly take the chance. Right now, like you don't even have anyone who's that. So that's all you can really ask for is like, is there a player there who has at least the upside that you're looking for? And there will be. Now, how they develop and what they ultimately turn into, like that's to be determined. Maybe they just top out as a number 2 center, which again is a valuable player. Maybe doesn't quite solve your long-term issue, but hey, this is going to be as talented a player as they've been able to draft since, at least Charlie McAvoy. And we didn't, there's a reason McAvoy fell outside the top 10. Like he wasn't as sure of a thing going into the draft as these guys at least look.
I think that's the biggest thing. And when I look at this group, like you mentioned, Misa is going to be a top 2 guy. That's someone who doesn't really have a lot of holes in his game, if any. And again, I think if the Bruins pick 1st or 2nd, if they somehow get up there, if you're 2nd, you're praying whoever's 1st doesn't take Misa. And if you're 1st, I think you take Misa. And it's funny, I was talking about this with Conor the other day, reacting to a column Fluto wrote of like a dream NHL offseason. And he mentioned, the dream is get the number 1 pick and draft Schaefer. And I think Schaefer's a great defenseman. Looks like he could be a Miro Heiskanen kind of guy. You have Misa ranked over Schaefer in your draft board. And I agree with that. I think Misa, especially for what the Bruins need, and Schaefer would definitely help out on D, and you'd be your core on D would be outstanding for the next 5 years. To me, Misa fills a need. Like of the centers in that top grouping, Misa, Frundell, Haggs, Denoyer, O'Brien, and McQueen, he feels the most apt to be a number 1 center, at least from what I've seen, what I've read, what I've watched. And that's why, like, if I have the 1st, 2nd pick, I'm banking on Misa if I'm the Bruins.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, like, I don't think you don't draft for need 1st overall.
Agreed.
So if you think there's a big gap, if you think like Schaefer's just far and away the best prospect, you take Schaefer. I just happen to think there's not a big gap there, and there might not even be a gap at all. Like I'm open to the idea that Misa might just be the best player. I like when I watch them and go through and read up on them, I don't see what is supposed to make this like an easy Schaefer goes 1st overall. And that's more a testament to Misa than it is to Schaefer. Like, it's not a knock on Schaefer at all. I watch Misa and I'm like, why is he only number 2? Like, why should I not seriously consider him 1st? And I don't see a reason not to do that. As he said, he's a complete player. There's no holes in his game. Like, he's a great skater, playmaker, shooter. He plays with some edge. He's responsible defensively. He was used in all situations. He led the OHL in shorthanded points, in addition to points of all types. So I'm like, yeah, I don't really see like what is supposed to be any kind of knock on this guy that would make him not worth taking 1st overall in a draft where, as we've said, there's not that generational Connor McDavid type pick.
And when it comes to Misa, what I always find fascinating is a lot of the high-end kids who come up, especially when they're under 18, the high-end skill guys, the guys who put up a lot of points, typically aren't great in their own end of the ice. They're not the hardest competitors. They're not trying to win every battle. They don't, they're not always smart. They try to do too much. They try to stick handle through a bunch of guys. Happens all the time. It happens every year. And some of the prospects in this draft have a little bit of that because that's natural for a guy who's under 18. He doesn't have any of that, really. He doesn't. Like, you're getting someone who plays your brand of hockey, but also can easily turn it on offensively and has all those skills. And that's why, to me, like, if I'm drafting first on the Bruins, I'm going Misa. And I agree with you. If I'm drafting first and, outside of the Sharks, who just don't need another top six center, I'm drafting Misa. And I agree. I also agree with you in that if you're drafting for need at 1, trade the pick. Like, don't. That's insane. We saw it with the NFL draft with Cam Ward and the Titans, and quarterback's a little bit more, different of a position. But if Schaefer's that much better than Misa, and the Bruins have the number 1 pick, and they believe that Schaefer's that much better than Misa, then you pick Schaefer. I just think Misa makes way too much sense for this team and for what they need right now.
Yeah, I agree. And it is worth mentioning too with Schaefer. It's like he missed from December on, broke his collarbone at World Juniors, and he looked great in 4 periods at World Juniors and was off to a great start. And if he had been able to keep playing and continued at that pace and had one of the best seasons a draft eligible defenseman has ever had in the OHL, then it would probably be a no-brainer. But for all we know, maybe he would have slowed down at some point. Maybe he would have hit a hiccup somewhere along the lines. You can't just assume he was just going to continue to be that good all season. So it's unfortunate. There's nothing you can do about an injury that was suffered from just a hard play he makes coming back on the back check and, an unfortunate crash into the net. But I also feel like that's kind of getting overlooked where everyone's like, well, he did enough through December to earn it. And it's not really how it works. You can't just ignore missing the entire second half of the season.
And that's one thing that a lot of these high-end draft eligible kids don't benefit from, is they have to play a full season. I mean, if James Haggs had somehow missed this whole past season, we would likely be sitting here going, well, James Haggs is the number 1 pick, and then it's everybody else, because we're going off of his 18 NTDP year and his performance at the end of that season. But he did play his full season, and you saw warts. And I think that, when we talk about Haggs, James Haggs, I think the great equalizer of college hockey is that you can see warts in someone in a young player's game, and you can already see certain things. And that's not to say that they're bad or anything like that. But one college coach told me it's the great equalizer of, you see how they are against older guys. I mean, James Haggs going up against 24-year-old defensemen and, older teams, so to speak. So, Schaefer didn't really have that, obviously, in the O, and then he was hurt for most of the year. So you didn't really get to see that full sample size. And look, he's probably going to be a really good NHL defenseman. I'm not I guess Scott, you and I are an anti-Matthew Schaefer podcast at this point.
Just throw that on the title. We'll stand out.
That's if the Bruins end up drafting him, we're just going to be like, all right, well, we're done. We're not, we'll hang him up. No more covering this team. But I do think that is important that I have seen most draft experts and even Central Scouting just sort of Schaefer number 1, kind of definitively. And I've been kind of surprised by that too. I want to get into the centers outside of Misa, because the chances are that the Bruins, unless Michael Misa falls, unless they're, Michael Misa needs to have a Shadur Sanders type thing where he just before the draft, horrible interviews, his parents need to come out and be super loud and everything. And
I mean, he was -10 in their first round playoff loss. Just harp on that. Guy's a bum, clearly.
There you go. Bum. Yeah.
Not the result of atrocious goaltending at all. Just he was really bad.
That's it. Yeah, Michael Misa, horrendous. Oh, drafting him number 1 or 2, horrible idea. Stay away from him. Character problems. But I want to get into the centers in a bit. Haggs, Frindell, Denoyer. But first, our friends over at Game Time. Scott, it is May. Spring is here. It's really nice out. No better time to go to a ball game. go catch a game at Fenway, or if you're in a different city, go watch one there. There's also basketball playoffs. You want to go catch the Celtics here in Boston. Hard to beat that playoff atmosphere. And if you live near a ballpark or an arena, sometimes it doesn't come together until the last minute. And thankfully, Game Time has you covered with last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. Scott, I'm not the best planner. I'm not. I'll admit it. So sometimes it is last minute, and Game Time thankfully bails me out. So
that's like when you text me 3 minutes before the podcast and you're like, "Hey, you want to come on?" And I'm like, "What, Evan?"
Sometimes I like things last minute, and Scott, you're like Game Time. You're just as convenient, and we appreciate that. There's also zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. There's all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. There's seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And there's Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Scott, what time is it?
Game time?
It is game time. It is, in fact, game time. It's also likely Frindell, Haggens, or Denoyer time. So in your big board, you have your ranking is... So Misa 1, Schaefer 2, Anton Frindell 3, James Haggens 4, Caleb Denoyer 5, and then you have Jake O'Brien, Porter Martone, and Roger McQueen. And then for your mock draft you did with the skate pod, you had the Blackhawks with the number 1 pick, taking Matthew Schaefer. You had the Preds at number 2, taking Michael Misa. You had Martone going to the Sharks at number 3, Flyers at 4, taking Frindell, and then the Bruins taking James Haggens at 5. I find this interesting because I think we're all assuming that the Sharks are going to be the number 1 pick because they have the most likely odds at the number 1 pick. And they'll likely take a defenseman because they have Celebrini and Will Smith, whom they drafted the last 2 years. But if they don't get the number 1 pick or even the number 2 pick, Schaefer's probably off the board. So why are you going to draft another center? I think you're right in that Porter Martone would make a lot of sense for them, which would then open up potentially, if the Bruins are picking 5th, like your mock draft has them picking, and they have a good chance of picking 5th, getting a center like Haggens or Frindell, who might not have been there had the Sharks picked first and things gone all chalk.
Right. And I am interested to see where Porter Martone goes, because I think not just the Bruins, but, quite a few of these teams near the top probably lean towards centers. And most teams do in general, because you almost can't have too many of them. Like, yes, technically you can, but I think teams figure, like, push comes to shove, take a center, and if you have to move someone to the wing at some point, you do. But, you see how hard it is to find centers, because the Bruins are going through it right now, because, like, once teams have them, they just keep them. They never let them go. So, even a team like the Sharks, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they take a center, but they do need help on the wing. And I also think, they could use a player in the mold of Porter Martone, like kind of that power forward type. They have a lot of skill, like, in their young players, but it feels like they could use
a lot of New
someone
England too in those young players.
Yeah, it feels like they could use someone with a little bit of attitude. So he would fit that. But yeah, I mean, whether it's the Bruins, Flyers, Predators, like, those are all teams that need centers, and the Predators and Flyers are slotted in right in front of you. Blackhawks can probably go any direction, really. I think they still need a lot as they continue to rebuild. Probably not a right shot defenseman, because they have Levshunov and Renzel, but you're not taking a right shot defenseman that high anyway. Schaefer's a left shot. So it will, like, I think a pretty good center will fall to the Bruins no matter where they are, but it's a question of, are you going to get your pick of the litter, or are you going to be 6th or 7th and you just kind of get whoever's left?
That's the worry. But I also, I think it's interesting because as I do homework on Frindell, great goal scorer, wicked shot, playing at a very high level over in Sweden, putting up really good numbers. If James Haggens, who we saw it this year, exactly a point per game guy at BC, didn't quite have the season that I think we all thought he would have, but still solid season, clearly needs another year at BC. Little smaller. And then you have Caleb Desnoyers, who's a great setup guy, maybe not as much of a goal scorer, although he did have 35 goals this year in the Q. Now, the Q's a good league, but I don't think it's not college, and it's not what Frindell played over in the second men's league in Sweden.
Yeah, the Allsvenskan.
The Allsvenskan, yes. There you go. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, the Q's the Q's not even the OHL, really. Like, even if you're just going Canadian major juniors. Now, the point totals are, the OHL tends to be a little more higher scoring, but it's also there's just more really good players there than the Q.
And the Q also is known, like, I know players around here, not that it's not an easier junior league, but you can put up good numbers in the Q. It's very high offense. It's it can be a bit run and gun. Not to say there's no defense or goaltending, there is, but it is known more as run and gun. So I think with Desnoyers, that might be the strike against him. I still really like the player. I do. I like Desnoyers. I would be fine with the Bruins getting him. Now, the question is if the Bruins are, because with the way the percentages work, they probably won't be third or fourth. If they were third or fourth, it would be like, all right, who's your pick of Frindell, Haggens, and Desnoyers? Who are you picking out of that? Or you could even throw Jake O'Brien in there as well. But, unless they're first or second, they're likely fifth or sixth. So you're right. I don't know if the Bruins are going to have their pick. I like Frindell the most of that crew. I think that, given his size, given his shot, given his abilities at play driving and getting to the middle and doing it against older men, doing it against adults, I like that a lot. I do. And then I'd put Haggens and Desnoyers, which is literally the exact same thing you have, so we can't even really debate it. But I think I don't think the Bruins are going to have their pick of those three. I think it's going to come down to who's left of those guys. Yeah,
well, and I will note as well that it is like, even if they're 6 or 7, it's not impossible that one of those guys drops to them, because so like, we're kind of consensus on this, and when we did it for the Skate podcast, we all had pretty similar rankings, but you do still see rankings that have Frindell like outside the top 5, or some people even have Haggens dropping out of the top 5. I still see a couple that have Desnoyers like closer to 10, and I'm like, that almost seems like not updated, right? Because he's risen higher on everyone else's rankings. So all it takes is like one team to kind of upset the apple cart a little bit and be like, you know what, we really like Victor Eklund, or we really like Roger McQueen, or we want a defenseman and it's Jackson Smith or Radim Murtka. And all of a sudden, we think there's going to be this run on centers from like 2 through 6. And it's like, well, that might not necessarily happen. Like, maybe you mix in a winger or a defenseman in there, and now all of a sudden you're sitting at 6, and one of Frindell or Haggens is still on the board. So, these things tend to change and not always go according to plan, even when it does seem like we have this like whole block of centers that are going to go pretty high.
It comes down to one opinion can change everything with a team, right? I mean, not everybody's in agreement. Everybody uses NHL Central Scouting, or the fans do at least, as like a barometer. Central Scouting is just a certain group of opinions. It's not everybody. Teams use it to scout players, but the Central Scouting rankings aren't teams' own rankings of players. Every team goes about it their own way. So I agree with you. I think we could. And I think with this draft especially, because, Misa and Schaefer seem pretty consensus 1, 2, however you want to order them. After that, it's really open. Like, some people like Haggens more than Frindell. Some people like Desnoyers more than Haggens. Some people like O'Brien more than them, and McQueen, or Porter Martone, or Eklund, as you said. So, like, it could go in any different direction. Teams could, we don't see this a ton, but teams could trade up and get in and get a guy that they want who you maybe didn't expect to go in the top 5. So, like, there's all that stuff. So I agree. Maybe there is. I just think, based off consensus, it doesn't feel like the Bruins are going to get to say, well, we get to pick between Frindell, Haggens, and Desnoyers, or O'Brien, or McQueen. Now, the question is, if they're 7th, who is still there? Like, Is it McQueen, who's had, back issues this year, but he's, big center. So they'll have Letourneau at 6'7" and McQueen at 6'5". Or, is Desnoyers still available? I think that's going to be the real question based on where they pick, because it feels like it's going to be a center.
Yeah, you would certainly think so, unless they just absolutely fall in love with one of these other wings or defensemen. I do wonder, like, so my big board that you referenced, like, that's not necessarily my ranking of like best players. It's from the Bruins perspective. And I do wonder, like, say it gets to 7 and there's been this run on centers and Porter Martone is still there. It's like, well, Porter Martone's like pretty much universally considered a top 5 talent. So now do you like him more than whatever center might be left, whether it's McQueen or O'Brien? And that's like, we're just not going to know what the Bruins evaluation is, because if they're sitting there and they still have all those guys pretty close, then yeah, they're probably taking the center still. But if they're like, man, we had Porter Martone as the 3rd best player on our board and he's sitting here at 7 and we love him, like, pretty hard to pass on him just because you need a center.
100%.
And there's going to be teams that have Martone ranked that highly. Like, there are questions about his skating, but there's also a lot to like there. And we know teams love the physical, bigger power forward types. And, I do think there are times like I'd like to see a little bit more of that from him. Sometimes it seems like he needs to be dragged in a little bit more than like forcing the issue himself. But he does have that in his game. And he's also just very skilled offensively.
Yeah, my one worry with him is skating. I always think it's hard if skating, it's hard to teach skating once you get to a certain age, especially at 18. And if in your draft year you do have questions about your skating, not to say you got to be the fastest guy or the most technically sound skater, but his stride makes me a little worried. His sort of what's the word? I sound like an NHL scout saying this, but those first few steps to gain momentum, gain acceleration, not my favorite. Not to say I wouldn't take them. If it's at 7, I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
But again, it comes down to what the teams need above them. I mean, you look at the Flyers, right? Do they want a big, tougher right wing for a guy like Michkov? The Predators kind of could use anything and everything. If the Predators are 4 and they have Teddy Stiga, do they take Haggs to pair with him? I mean, I don't think you make your pick off that, but that could be something. I mean, that would definitely be a nice little New England storyline. But I think it comes down to what the teams need above you. We could sit here and guess like where the Bruins end up. It just stinks they got that extra point in that last game of the season, because things would have been different. It would be having a different conversation. So anyway, that's the draft lottery. That's Monday night. You can look forward to that. Riveting stuff. Well, Scott, what can the people look forward to from you in the next coming weeks?
We still got regular skate pods going up 2 or 3 times a week. Writing on WEI.com. We'll obviously have a reaction to the draft lottery and all that. And continuing to cover a different kind of off season, but one that I still find interesting, and it's only going to get more interesting as we get closer to the draft and free agency.
I keep saying that. And when was the last time we cared about the NHL draft at such a high level around here? So that's been a big one. You have the coaching search. That's a big one. You have what's the general manager's future. That's a big one. Free agency. You have a lot of money. Mitch Marner. I think we've talked about this. Like, what trades they make this offseason, how they get back into contention. I think this is fascinating. I just wish there were playoff games. That would be a little bit more fun. But I think fans would be in agreement with me. But yes, look out for skate pods. And yes, Scott, thanks for doing this. That's Scott McLaughlin. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.